Alrighty, hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Katie, otherwise known as the Vintage Academic. I am a transfer student at none other than UC Berkeley, where I am a senior studying anthropology and archaeology. In today's video, I am going to share with you what kinds of classes I'm taking this semester, and this is a series I've been doing on my channel ever since I got into UC Berkeley, and it is 100% inspired by another person here on YouTube, Olivia Brown. She studies anthropology at UCLA, so all credit goes to her for the idea of this video. Anyways, like I said, today I'm going to share with you guys the classes that I'm enrolled in for my first semester of my senior year as a anthropology major. I'm technically enrolled in 4 classes. 3 of those are anthropology related. One of them is a dance fitness physical education class, and then I also have my supervised undergraduate research apprenticeship position. Now, since I am just really getting straight to the meat and potatoes of this video, let's take a look at the classes that I am enrolled in. First up is Anthro 112, which is special topics in biological anthropology, and this one specifically is called the Paleopathological Perspective. The course description for this class says, the course will explore the record and human experience of health and disease in the past, with particular focus on approaches in bioarchaeology. So in this class, we have been learning the different biological markers on skeletons that we can use in order to assess the presence of disease, but most importantly, we focus on the biocultural approach, which is trying to understand the cultural factors of ancient diseases. Biocultural approach attempts to understand the relationship and the intricacies between human biology and human culture and how the two can impact each other. So we don't look strictly at just the biological mechanisms that allow markers of poor health on the bone to happen. We look at the fact that they are there and then try to extrapolate out from there why they happened, what that lived experience might have been like, and its broader implications in terms of like a population study, not just one single individual. So this class is in the form of a lecture. We meet twice a week. This professor is a little bit different because we also have discussion within class. So typically on Tuesdays we have lecture, and then on Thursdays we have a discussion where one group of students comes up with questions, and then we just go around the room kind of talking and discussing it amongst ourselves. In terms of homework for this class, I have weekly readings, which is typically about 2 to 4 articles, and then I have to do some kind of writing response to those articles to just make sure that we read it and we understand what's happening. Then each person gets put into a different group to lead discussion every week, but that's going to consist of reading the articles and coming up with discussion questions to share with my fellow students. We also had 2 exams. One was an anatomy exam to make sure that we knew what we were talking about when we were referencing certain parts of the body, and then the second exam was short answer, open book, take-home quiz about certain paleopathological concepts. Then lastly, in this class, we have a semester-long project that we're supposed to be working on. It's called a creative impact project, which means essentially anything that's not an essay. So I am choosing to do a YouTube video, which is why I was filming earlier today. I was looking at the interaction between the cultural item of a corset and how it impacts human biology, and that was a whole long video that I made that will have been published before this video goes up, so if you want to watch it, I'll leave a link to it in the description below. So far, this class has been fairly straightforward. I think that the concepts are super interesting. I don't really think much about disease because I have a bit of a phobia of infectious diseases, which sucks for somebody living through a pandemic, but I digress. Aside from like the whole diseases part, we do also talk about things like nutrition, stress, environmental factors, all of those things that can also impact health outcomes in an individual. So aside from the disease part of the class, I have found it really interesting, and it also helps me better understand how bioarchaeology kind of fits into a broader scheme of anthropology and understanding the way that people have lived both in the present and the past. The next class is Anthro 136A, Museum, Exhibit, Curation, and Design. The course description says, a practical introduction to contemporary museum approaches to exhibition design, with particular application to the design of exhibits that present cultural heritage in anthropology, art, and natural history museums. Now, this is halfway between a lecture and a seminar class. It's rather small, and we meet twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays. The first half of the class consisted mostly of lectures and discussions where we would come to class having read our readings for the week, prepared to discuss the concepts of those readings. We had a couple of homework assignments here and there. Obviously, we have our weekly readings. Again, it's usually 1 or 2 articles or a couple chapters of a book. In terms of like actual written assignments, we did have 2, if I'm recalling correctly, and they were both exhibit reviews. So we had to actually go and visit a museum exhibit and and then based off of what we had learned in class about writing museum exhibits, we had to write our own museum exhibit and then present it to the class. But the main focus of this class is actually putting together a hypothetical exhibit as a whole class, and then writing up a grant proposal along the National Endowment for the Humanities guidelines as if we were actually writing a grant for a real exhibit that we were going to turn into the NEH to try and get money for. So I think that is a really interesting aspect of this class, because even though it's difficult to do a class-wide project, I feel as though it's giving me practical experience on how to do grant writing, how to put together an exhibit, how to collaborate with a room full of 30 people. So overall, I really like this class because I find museums fascinating, and it has really broken down my understanding of museums and how they work, and kind of reconstructed it in a way that is anti-colonialist and decentralizes white European thinking when it comes to museums, and thinking about how we can move forward with future museum exhibits and museums just in general under a decolonized paradigm, if that makes sense. So definitely a really interesting class, and the thing that I like about the professor who teaches this class is that she always has some kind of practicality to it, so that by the end we learn skills that are actually practical and applicable to our futures as anthropologists. Not to mention that she's also like one of the leaders in her area of research when it comes to museums, so it's pretty cool to take a class from her. Anyways, moving on. My next class is Anthro 196, which is just the general number for any undergraduate seminar for the anthropology department. This one is specifically a seminar that focuses on historical archaeology, and not just historical archaeology, but historical archaeology as a form of social justice. How many times can I say historical archaeology in one sentence? The course description for this one says, this class will focus on the exciting developments of historical archaeology in the 21st century as the discipline of archaeology that has explicitly come to orient itself as community engaged, future thinking, and committed to issues of social justice, indigenous archaeologies, anti-racism, and sustainability. So like I said, this is a seminar style class, which is a little bit different than a lecture. So typically a lecture is a larger number of students, and the professor stands at the front of the class and tells you a bunch of information that you write down in notes and try to understand. A seminar is more based off of our readings that we have to read each week. We only met once a week for 2 hours, and the class size is much, much smaller. I think we have something like 15 students in that class, and it mostly consists of discussion. So usually the professor either leads discussion for the entirety of class, or we break up into smaller groups and we talk amongst ourselves as students and then come back to the class to share our thoughts as a whole. So this class, in terms of homework, we have readings every single week because, like I said, it is a seminar. So what we talk about in class is based off of our readings, and the readings usually correlate to whatever module we're talking about that week. So things like how people think of human bodies in the archaeological record. We talked about the archaeologies of reproductive control, so talking about the development of like birth control. We also talked about the archaeologies of incarceration, poverty, gentrification. We also talked about specific sites like the Tulsa Race Massacre that happened in 1921. So I particularly like this class because everything is taken from the approach of community engaged scholarship, which means that the archaeological investigations are happening in conjunction with the wants, needs, and desires of the community that archaeology impacts. If you're new to my channel and you don't know anything about archaeology, for a long time archaeology has been incredibly exploitative, and it hasn't taken into account the way that it interacts with the people who are still living today, descendant communities, source communities, local communities, literally anybody in the area that this archaeology could impact. For a long time, archaeologists just came in and took things wantonly and brought them back to their museums, taking them out of their context, taking them away from the people that they belonged to, and claiming ownership over them. But community engaged archaeology really tries to hone in and focus on like, how can we answer questions that the community wants answered, how can we serve their needs while also answering our research questions. So I've really liked this class because it approaches everything from that perspective. I also really like seminar classes because I like to talk and I process things better when I get to talk through things with people, so I've really enjoyed this class. In terms of homework, I think I forgot to mention homework. So in terms of homework, we have 3 position papers, which this professor is not very intensive in the homework, so these papers are not very long at all. I think the longest one that I've written has been like 3 pages. And then for our semester like project, we have to read a book about something that has to do with historical archaeology and then write a book review. I'm actually really excited about the book that I chose to read. It is titled Archaeology of Magic, Gender and Domestic Protection in 17th Century. So I'm excited to read that. I haven't started yet, even though it is November 24th and my book review is due on December 10th, but we're not going to talk about that. So I think that actually wraps up that class, and that is the end of my anthropology related courses. By the way, I should probably also mention the amount of units. Each one of these classes is 4 units, and at Berkeley full-time is 13 units. So 3 classes at 4 units is 12. So in order to make up that 1 extra unit, I needed to be a full-time student. I am taking a dance fitness class where I go in once a week on Mondays for 2 hours to dance my little heart out to music. This class didn't have any homework, but during the class we did have groups where we had to choreograph our own dances, and our dance was choreographed to Wannabe by Spice Girls, and it was a lot of fun. And then lastly, I have my supervised undergraduate research apprenticeship program, which does actually count for 1 unit. I work with a graduate student who is researching foodways in the Southwest, so I go in for 3 hours once a week on Wednesday mornings into the lab, where I help them sort through samples that come from an archaeological excavation in the Southwest. And I've shown this in my vlogs before and I've talked about it a little bit, but I'm not sure I've actually explained it, so let me just give you a little bit more details. When we are looking at these samples, we are looking for anything that's been carbonized, so anything that's been burnt. We can date carbon by using a technique called radiocarbon dating, so it's important to separate the carbonized items from the non-carbonized plant materials in order to, 1, date them. Carbonized materials are also things that have been cooked. That's how they get carbonized. So we're separating out the thing that is actually archaeological from any plant material that might have been mixed in over time. And then lastly, we are also trying to identify certain plant seeds that we come across in our samples. So that is what I do. I go in and I stare through a microscope at a petri dish and I pluck out all the little bits of burnt plant material. I am doing that this semester with the intention of continuing on next semester. And that, I believe, just about wraps up the classes that I'm taking this semester. I feel like I talked a lot and really fast, so I apologize if this video was a little bit short, but hopefully I sprinkled in some cool b-roll for you guys to look at, maybe me in the lab looking at the microscope. I have to wear this ridiculous medical tape over my mask, because if you don't and you breathe, your breath comes out the top of your mask and it fogs up the lens of the microscope, so I look really silly when I do that. Anyways, I hope you found this video informative and helpful. If you yourself are thinking about coming to UC Berkeley or you're thinking about studying anthropology, please do not hesitate to leave me any comments below if you have any questions about what it's like to study anthropology, and leave me a comment which of my classes sounded the most interesting to you and why. Don't forget to subscribe for more UC Berkeley vintage archaeology related content, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!